welcome. It is really great to have you with us today. You are about to embark on an epic hour-long audio exploration chronicling one of the most defining, uncompromising, and influential heavy metal groups of all time.
We are talking about Pantera.
Exactly. We're talking about Pantera. We have gathered a massive stack of factual sources, biographical records, and historical music archives for this. And our goal for you today is to trace this band's unbelievable evolution. We are going to start right at their formation in 1981 and walk you through every era, every triumph, and every tragedy.
Right up to their massive current activities in the present day of early 2026.
Right.
It is really essential to frame the significance of the subject right from the start. For you listening, this is not just a standard biography of a band. This is a sprawling saga of pure musical innovation.
It really is.
It is a story of extreme, dizzying highs and unimaginable, heartbreaking tragedy. But above all, it is a story of an enduring legacy that actually shifted the tectonic plates of heavy music. We are going to examine how four musicians captured lightning in a bottle, survived shifting industry trends, and created a sound so distinct and powerful that it continues to echo across stadiums worldwide today.
I want to unpack this from the very beginning because to truly understand Pantera, you have to travel back to 1981, specifically to the club scene in Arlington, Texas.
All right, the very early days.
Yeah. We're introduced to the Abbott brothers. You have Vinnie Paul on drums and Dimebag Darrell on guitar. They formed the band when they were just teenagers. Now, before they landed on the legendary name, they cycled through a few options. They were originally called Gemini, and then they changed it to, I think it was Eternity.
Yes, Eternity.
Right. It was actually a high school friend who suggested the name Pantera, which was inspired by the Di Tommaso Pantera sports car.
Which is a very fitting name for a band that would eventually become a high-performance machine.
Exactly. But the sound they started with is entirely different from the sound that made them famous. Could you break down what they actually sounded like in those early days?
Absolutely. If we connect this to the broader music scene of the early 1980s, heavy metal was undergoing a massive theatrical phase. When Pantera first formed, they were very much a glam metal band.
Spandex and hairspray.
Lots of it. Their early image and sound were heavily influenced by the larger-than-life aesthetics and soaring guitar heroics of bands like Kiss, Van Halen, and Dokken. We're talking about brightly colored clothing, heavily teased hair, and highly melodic, accessible heavy metal. But there is a crucial foundational factor in this era that we must examine.
You're talking about their father.
Yes, Jerry Abbott. He was an established country music songwriter and producer, and he actually produced Pantera's first three albums. That would be Metal Magic in 1983, Projects in the Jungle in 1984, and I Am the Night in 1985.
And he did not just produce them in passing. He recorded them at his own Pantego studios, correct? What kind of advantage did that give a group of teenagers playing local clubs?
It was an immeasurable advantage. Imagine being a 15 or 16-year-old aspiring musician, and instead of practicing in a dusty garage, your laboratory is a fully functional, professional recording studio.
That is huge.
It really is. Jerry Abbott taught his sons the mechanics of audio production. They learned how microphones capture sound, how to mix tracks, and how to operate within a studio environment. This gave these young musicians a professional incubator to hone their craft long before they ever signed a major record contract.
That studio access was an undeniable advantage, but the band itself was experiencing a revolving door of early members. They had vocalists like Donnie Hart and a bassist named Tommy Bradford in the very early days. Eventually, the lineup solidified with Terry Glaze taking over lead vocals, and a bassist who joined in 1982 named Rex Brown, though back then he was going by the stage name Rex Rocker.
Right. And Dimebag Darrell, who was already an absolute prodigy on the guitar, was going by Diamond Darrell.
Diamond Darrell, yeah. They were playing regional shows around Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana, sporting acts like Stryper and Quiet Riot.
They were relentlessly grinding it out in the regional club circuit. And this is a point that is often overlooked. Playing that specific style of 1980s glam metal requires a tremendous amount of technical skill.
It is not easy music to play.
Not at all. The guitar solos are intricate, the rhythms have to be tight, and the entire performance demands precision. Because they spent the first half of the decade playing complex, technically demanding traditional metal, Dimebag, Vinnie, and Rex built a foundation of instrumental proficiency that was utterly unbreakable. They learned how to lock into a groove and command a stage.
So they have this undeniable technical foundation, but they are trapped in spandex while the world around them is getting heavier. How How exactly do you bridge that massive gap?
Hmm.
That brings us to 1986, and a very profound realization from Vinnie Paul regarding their stage gear.
Exactly. By the mid-1980s, the heavy metal landscape was rapidly shifting. Thrash metal was emerging, bringing a much darker, heavier, and faster sound. Bands like Metallica and Slayer were changing the rules entirely.
And Pantera was feeling left behind.
The members of Pantera were feeling constrained by the glam image, which was beginning to feel entirely inauthentic to their evolving musical tastes. Vinnie Paul had a moment of clarity during a band meeting. He looked at their theatrical stage gear and simply stated, "These magic clothes don't play music, we do. Let's just go out there and be comfortable. Jeans, t-shirt, whatever, and see where it goes."
That is a phenomenal quote. It marks the philosophical beginning of their shift away from neon and hairspray. But changing the clothes is one thing. Changing the sound required a major personnel shift.
It did.
By 1986, tensions with their vocalist, Terry Glaze, reached a breaking point. From what the biographical records indicate, Glaze's vocal style was deeply rooted in that melodic, high-pitched glam approach, which no longer fit the heavier, aggressive direction the Abbott brothers and Rex Brown wanted to pursue.
That is correct. And there was also an administrative fracture. The final split came down to a dispute over the band's internal voting system. Glaze felt that the Abbotts, including their father Jerry, who was acting as their manager, always voted as a unified bloc, leaving him structurally outnumbered on major decisions.
So he was constantly outvoted.
Exactly. Following this dispute, Glaze and the band officially parted ways. This left Pantera in desperate need of a frontman who could match the intense sonic evolution they were attempting to achieve.
The audition process to replace Terry Glaze sounds like it was absolutely grueling. It really shows you exactly how desperately they wanted a heavier sound, but also how difficult it was to find the right fit in Texas at that time. They auditioned a singer named Matt Lamore, who had a David Coverdale look, but he simply could not hit the demanding high notes, and his stage presence lacked the necessary aggression.
Then they brought in Rick Mathieson.
Right, but there was a massive cultural clash there. Mathieson could not adapt to the deeply ingrained Southern culture of the Texas-based members. They even tried a singer named David Peacock, but his voice just did not suit the forceful direction they were heading. They were searching for a very specific lightning bolt.
That lightning bolt arrived in the form of an 18-year-old native of New Orleans named Phil Anselmo.
Enter Phil Anselmo.
He had heard Pantera was looking for a singer, and at the end of 1986, he was invited to audition in Texas. The chemistry was instantaneous, and he was hired on the spot. Anselmo's arrival was the ultimate catalyst. He immediately clicked with the other three members musically and culturally. But perhaps just as importantly, Anselmo brought his music collection with him.
What specifically was in that collection that made such an impact?
He introduced the band to his mixtapes, which featured incredibly aggressive, pioneering thrash and extreme metal bands. He was listening to Slayer, Venom, and a New Orleans band called Order.
That exposure was massive.
He essentially exposed the instrumentalists to an entirely new level of sonic extremity. The Abbott brothers were already phenomenal musicians, but Anselmo gave them a new vocabulary of heaviness. This fundamentally changed the band's trajectory.
You can actually hear that exact transition happening in real time on their 1988 album, Power Metal. This is such a fascinating bridge album. It is the first record with Phil Anselmo on vocals, and it is a complete hybrid.
It really sits right between two eras.
It blends the remnants of their 1980s glam roots with traditional heavy metal, while heavily introducing the speed and aggression of thrash. Anselmo's vocals on this album are fascinating to analyze. He is employing a very hard-edged, soaring style, often compared to Rob Halford of Judas Priest. It is also around this time that their visual image evolves drastically. They completely abandon the bright colors and fully adopt a darker, uncompromising look dominated by denim and leather.
While that sonic evolution was happening, an incredibly surprising historical event occurred. Right around the release of Power Metal in 1988, Dave Mustaine, the visionary leader of the highly successful thrash band Megadeth, was looking for a new lead guitarist. Mustaine recognized the sheer undeniable brilliance of Dimebag Darrell's playing and officially asked him to join Megadeth.
Wait, I want to pause right there. You are telling me Dave Mustaine offered Dimebag the lead guitar spot in Megadeth right before Pantera achieved their massive breakthrough.
That is exactly right. It was a massive, life-altering opportunity. Dimebag was actually open to the idea, but he had one strict, non-negotiable condition. He insisted that his brother, Vinnie Paul, had to come with him to play drums. The Abbott brothers considered themselves a package deal.
That is incredible loyalty.
However, Mustaine had just hired drummer Nick Menza and could not accommodate Vinnie. Because of that, Dimebag politely declined the offer. Mustaine ended up hiring Marty Friedman, and the Abbott brothers remained laser-focused on Pantera.
That is staggering. The brotherly loyalty there is profound. And staying the course proved to be the right move, though it was not easy. You have to understand the pure persistence of this band. They knew they had something special, but the music industry did not agree right away.
They faced a wall of rejection.
They were rejected 28 times by major record labels. Almost every major label on earth passed on them. But they kept pushing, and finally, representatives from Atco Records, Mark Ross and Stevenson Eugenia, traveled to Texas to see them perform live. The live show was so blisteringly intense and undeniably powerful that Atco signed them immediately.
That monumental signing led directly to the creation of their major label debut, the genre-defining masterpiece Cowboys from Hell, released in 1990. This album is universally recognized as the birth of what the band themselves called power groove, which later became known globally as groove metal. They completely jettisoned any lingering glam influences.
You mentioned power groove. For those listening who might feel the sheer volume but not know the music theory, what exactly did Dimebag and the band do differently here compared to standard thrash metal?
That is a crucial distinction. Think of traditional 1980s thrash metal as a flat-out sprint. It is all about maximum speed, playing as fast as humanly possible. What Dimebag did was pull back on the throttle. By slowing the tempo down slightly, he created space between the notes. He utilized syncopation, which means he was emphasizing the offbeats in the rhythm.
Giving it that bounce.
Exactly. If thrash metal was a chainsaw, groove metal was a sledgehammer. Slower, but with a devastating blunt force impact. He locked his massive guitar riffs perfectly in time with Vinnie Paul's kick drums and Rex Brown's bass, creating an incredibly tight, heavy rhythm section that physically forced the listener to move. It was aggressive, but it had a distinct, undeniable southern swing to it.
Another factor in that devastating sound was Dimebag's specific gear, right? I understand he was not using the standard equipment most metal guitarists used at the time.
Yes. While most heavy metal guitarists relied on traditional vacuum tube amplifiers for a warm, saturated sound, Dimebag heavily utilized solid-state Randall amplifiers. Solid-state technology allowed him to achieve a uniquely precise, razor-sharp, and highly aggressive tone. It provided an incredibly tight staccato attack, which was absolutely necessary to make those syncopated groove riffs punch through the mix.
The vocal transformation at Cowboys from Hell is just as striking as the guitar tone. While Phil Anselmo still utilized some of those soaring, high-pitched screams on certain tracks, he largely shifted his delivery. He adopted an abrasive, rhythmic, guttural style that perfectly complemented the heavy staccato guitar riff.
It fit the new sound perfectly.
This album is stacked with classics, but you really have to look at the track Cemetery Gates. It is an absolute epic, showcasing both the heavy, driving groove and an incredible melodic sensibility, proving they were not just about sheer volume. They were master songwriters capable of deep dynamics.
This era also marked massive touring milestones for the band. They supported major acts, but the absolute pinnacle of this period was the historic 1991 Monsters in Moscow show. This festival is a defining moment in 20th century music history. Pantera, alongside AC/DC, Metallica, and the Black Crowes, played at the Ticino airfield to a crowd estimated at over 500,000 people.
Can you paint a picture of the atmosphere there? Yeah. The geopolitical magnitude of 500,000 people experiencing Western metal at that specific time must have been unimaginable.
You have to consider the exact historical context. This massive concert took place just a few months before the official dissolution of the Soviet Union. For decades, Western music, particularly rebellious rock and heavy metal, had been heavily restricted or entirely banned behind the Iron Curtain.
So this was an explosion of suppressed energy.
Exactly. This festival was a massive, unprecedented celebration of newfound freedom. The atmosphere was incredibly tense but ecstatic, heavily guarded by military personnel. Pantera stepped onto that massive stage and delivered a performance of sheer, unbridled ferocity. Footage of the event shows a sea of hundreds of thousands of people moving in unison to the power groove. It cemented Pantera's reputation globally as one of the most formidable, vital live acts on the planet.
That momentum carries right into 1992, with the release of Vulgar Display of Power. If Cowboys from Hell was the introduction to the new Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power was the absolute cementing of their legacy. They stripped away the falsetto vocals entirely, replacing them with a hardcore-influenced, aggressive, shouted delivery.
The guitar tone became even heavier and more punishing.
This album includes tracks that are basically the foundational blueprints for modern metal: Walk, This Love, and Hollow. It was also during this exact period that the band members formalized their public identities. Dimebag Darrell officially became Dimebag Darrell, and Rex Rocker officially became Rex Brown. They had found their ultimate, uncompromising form.
What is truly remarkable about this period is the commercial trajectory they achieved without compromising a single element of their aggressive sound. In fact, their music became even more abrasive. In 1994, they released their 7th studio album, Far Beyond Driven. Against all traditional industry logic, this incredibly extreme, punishingly heavy metal album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart.
#1. With that level of aggression.
It debuted at #1 in Australia as well. To have an album this aggressive top the mainstream charts was entirely unprecedented in music history.
And it is vital to explore why their specific brand of authenticity resonated so deeply at that time. Because you have to remember, 1994 was the absolute peak of the grunge era. Bands like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Alice in Chains had effectively wiped traditional 1980s heavy metal off the map. Why did Pantera survive and thrive when so many of their peers disappeared?
Pantera survived the massive cultural shift of the 1990s precisely because of their authenticity. Grunge was largely a rejection of the polished, artificial nature of 1980s glam metal. Pantera had already rejected that artificiality years prior. When the cultural tide turned toward raw, unfiltered emotion and stripped-down aggression, Pantera was already there, delivering the heaviest music imaginable.
They did not chase the trend.
They did not try to adopt the grunge sound at all. They simply doubled down on being the heaviest, most uncompromising band in the world. The music-buying public recognized that absolute sincerity.
The industry had to acknowledge them, too. They earned their very first Grammy nomination in 1995 for Best Metal Performance for the blistering track I Am Broken. They were on top of the world, dominating the charts and selling out arenas globally. It is worth noting their uncompromising vision extended to the album's visuals as well. The original artwork for Far Beyond Driven was deemed too controversial for public release, leading to a ban and subsequent replacement with the familiar image of a skull impaled by a drill bit.
But the focus of the fans remained entirely on the extreme direction of the music itself.
However, behind the scenes, extreme pressure and a massive physical toll were beginning to create serious, life-altering issues.
The physical demands of Pantera's live shows were immense. Phil Anselmo was renowned for his incredibly intense, athletic stage presence, frequently jumping off massive speaker cabinets and throwing his body around the stage. Years of this continuous punishment resulted in severe, chronic back pain.
And the touring schedule offered no relief.
Medical professionals advised Anselmo that surgery could correct the issue, but it would require a lengthy recovery period away from touring. Unwilling to spend that much time away from the band and fearing it would halt their massive momentum, Anselmo refused the surgery. Tragically, in an attempt to self-medicate and manage the excruciating daily pain, he began heavily using alcohol and ultimately descended into a severe heroin addiction.
The impact of this addiction was immediate and devastating to the band's internal dynamics. Anselmo began behaving erratically and physically distanced himself from the rest of the group. You can hear the profound isolation and darkness in the music they produced during this specific time. For their 8th studio album, The Great Southern Trendkill, released in 1996, the recording process was physically fractured.
They weren't even in the same state.
The instrumental tracks were recorded by Dimebag, Vinnie, and Rex in Dallas, Texas. Meanwhile, Phil Anselmo recorded his vocals entirely separately, working in Nine Inch Nails frontman Trent Reznor's studio down in New Orleans.
The music captured on The Great Southern Trendkill is arguably the darkest, most abrasive, and most experimental of their entire career. The pain, isolation, and descent into substance abuse are recurring, visceral, lyrical themes throughout the record. Despite the severe internal turmoil, the musical output remained incredibly potent.
Absolutely.
The track Floods from this album achieved massive critical acclaim, largely due to Dimebag Darrell's incredibly complex, atmospheric, and emotive guitar solo. That specific solo is consistently ranked by music historians and guitar publications as one of the greatest guitar solos ever recorded, showcasing a deeply haunting, melodic side to his playing. However, the personal demons driving this dark creativity culminated in a deeply tragic event.
The historical record points to the events of July 13, 1996. Following a homecoming concert in Texas, Phil Anselmo suffered a massive heroin overdose. The medical reports indicate his heart actually stopped beating for almost 5 minutes. Medical personnel were able to successfully revive him with a direct adrenaline injection. He apologized to his bandmates the following day and stated a clear intention to achieve sobriety.
But the damage to the relationship was done.
The revelation of the severe drug use and the highly public nature of the overdose caused a profound shock to Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrell. The ensuing press and internal discussions showcased deeply fractured perspectives. The Abbott brothers expressed feeling immense embarrassment and a sense of betrayal over the incident, feeling completely blindsided by the severity of the addiction. This moment created a permanent foundational rift within the band's personal relationships.
The trust was fundamentally broken. As the internal communication deteriorated between 1999 and 2003, the members began focusing their creative energies outward. We see a stark contrast in their musical pursuits during this era of side projects.
Two totally different directions.
Phil Anselmo dove deep into extreme underground music, working with his highly acclaimed supergroup Down and forming the aggressive hardcore project Superjoint Ritual. Conversely, the Abbott brothers, along with Rex Brown, embraced their Texas roots, forming a unique country metal crossover project called Rebel Meets Rebel, collaborating extensively with outlaw country artist David Allan Coe.
Even amidst all that internal tension, they still had massive cultural relevance, especially in their home state. There's an incredibly unique fact regarding their relationship with the NHL's Dallas Stars. During the hockey team's 1999 Stanley Cup championship run, Pantera actually wrote and recorded a heavy driving song called Puck Off, specifically for the team.
It is still used today.
It became an anthem and is still used as the official goal song at the American Airlines Center. And the celebration of that specific championship led to a rather infamous incident, did it not?
It did. Vinnie Paul hosted a massive Stanley Cup victory party at his house for the team. During the celebration, NHL player Guy Carbonneau actually attempted to throw the legendary Stanley Cup from the second-story balcony directly into Vinnie's swimming pool.
He missed.
He missed the water, the cup hit the concrete pool deck, and it sustained significant damage. It actually had to be sent away to be repaired by NHL-commissioned silversmiths. It is a remarkable anecdote that highlights their massive cultural footprint and larger-than-life status in Texas.
Despite the heavy involvement in these various side projects, Pantera did manage to reconvene in the studio to record what would become their final album together, Reinventing the Steel, released in the year 2000. It was a defiant return to their core, uncompromising groove metal sound. A notable piece of history from this album is the track Goddamn Electric, which features a blazing guest guitar solo by Slayer's Kerry King.
Fascinatingly, King recorded that complex solo in a single take backstage at a festival in Dallas, showcasing the immense respect and camaraderie among the top tier of metal musicians. The album was successful, but the promotional touring for it was cut short by global events.
The band was touring Europe in September 2001. Due to the tragic September 11 attacks, all global flights were grounded. The band found themselves stranded in Dublin, Ireland for 6 days, unable to travel. Their final live performance with the original core 4 members had actually taken place weeks prior in Yokohama, Japan, in August 2001.
Following the grounded flights and the end of the touring cycle, the band entered what was supposed to be an indefinite hiatus. However, the physical distance only widened the emotional distance between the members. The Abbott brothers waited in Texas, assuming Anselmo would return to Pantera after a break. But Anselmo's continuous, focused work with his side projects signaled otherwise.
By 2003, the Abbott brothers concluded that Anselmo had permanently abandoned the project, and they officially declared the complete dissolution of Pantera. What followed was a highly publicized, bitter war of words in the music press between the Abbott brothers and Anselmo.
The historical record shows two deeply entrenched sides.
Accusations regarding sobriety, professional commitment, and personal character were exchanged through numerous magazine interviews and television appearances. Through all of this public feuding, bassist Rex Brown maintained a strictly neutral stance. As he later stated to the press, it was a bunch of he said, she said nonsense that was going on, and I wasn't going to get in the middle of it.
The disbandment of Pantera was final. Following the official end, Vinnie Paul and Dimebag Darrell wasted no time. They formed a new band called Damage Plan, recruiting vocalist Pat Lackman and bassist Bob Zilla. They channeled their frustration over the breakup and their undeniable lifelong musical chemistry into a new record, releasing the album Newfound Power in 2004.
The album was a commercial success, debuting strongly and proving that the Abbott brothers still commanded massive respect and attention in the heavy metal community. They immediately hit the road for a nationwide club tour to support the record.
It is with profound respect and a commitment to purely factual reporting that we discuss the events of December 8, 2004. Damage Plan was scheduled to perform at the El Rosa Villa nightclub in Columbus, Ohio. Less than a minute into their first song, a mentally unstable 25-year-old man breached the stage with a firearm. In a horrific act of violence, he shot and killed Dimebag Darrell.
The assailant also murdered 3 others, a fan named Nathan Bray, a club employee named Aaron Hawk, and the band's security official, Jeff Thompson. The attacker was ultimately stopped by local law enforcement.
The entire music world was paralyzed by grief. The loss of Dimebag Darrell, universally beloved not just for his immense revolutionary talent, but also for his incredibly generous, welcoming spirit, was an incalculable blow to the heavy metal community.
In the aftermath of the tragedy, the tributes were monumental and deeply moving. Dimebag was buried in a custom Kiss casket, a specific request he had made inspired by his lifelong love of the band Kiss.
Furthermore, legendary guitarist Eddie Van Halen, whom Dimebag idolized profoundly, attended the service. Van Halen placed his original 1979 yellow and black Bumblebee guitar directly into the casket to be buried with Dimebag. It was a gesture of ultimate respect from one guitar revolutionary to another.
In the years following 2004, the estrangement between Vinnie Paul and Phil Anselmo became permanent. Despite various public comments and overtures over the years, the pain of the past and the immense trauma of the loss proved insurmountable. Vinnie Paul, however, absolutely refused to let the tragedy end his musical journey. He channeled his energy into a new collaborative project, forming the heavy metal supergroup Hell Yeah. He dedicated the rest of his life to producing new music and touring relentlessly, keeping the spirit of his brother alive through his legendary, powerful drumming.
Meanwhile, the historical legacy of Pantera only continued to grow exponentially. The music they created fundamentally shaped the entire next generation of heavy music. You can draw a direct sonic line from the power groove of Pantera to the massive, down-tuned riffs of the nu metal movement in the late 90s and the complex, aggressive rhythms of modern metalcore.
To celebrate their history, the band's catalog saw massive 20th anniversary reissues. A fascinating moment occurred in 2012 when a completely unreleased, fully recorded track called Piss, which was unearthed from the original Vulgar Display of Power studio sessions, was released to the public. Even decades later, a newly discovered Pantera track was treated as a major global music event.
As we assess their legacy and their massive influence, we must also address a long-standing historical controversy regarding the New Orleans band Exhorder. You mentioned earlier that Phil Anselmo brought Exhorder demo tapes to the band in 1986.
Can you explain the details of the situation?
It is a prominent piece of heavy metal history. Exhorder released demo tapes in the late 1980s featuring a very distinct groove-heavy thrash sound. Members of Exhorder and various music critics have historically suggested that Pantera, after being introduced to those specific tapes by Phil Anselmo, copied their stylistic shift toward groove metal. Critics have noted striking similarities in the mid-tempo aggression and the guttural vocal styles between the two bands.
However, it is equally important to report the full context.
Exhorder's lead vocalist has publicly stated on multiple occasions that he does not care about the criticism or the comparisons, explicitly acknowledging his deep mutual friendship with the members of Pantera and expressing his profound mourning for the loss of Dimebag Darrell. The history of heavy music is deeply interconnected, and bands constantly influence one another.
That context is vital. But tragedy struck the Abbott family once again. On June 2010, 2018, Vinnie Paul passed away at the age of 54. The official medical reports confirm the cause of death was heart failure due to dilated cardiomyopathy, which is a condition where the heart chambers enlarge and lose their ability to pump blood effectively, complicated by severe coronary artery disease.
The heavy metal community mourned the immense loss of the second founding brother. Vinnie Paul was a true titan behind the drum kit, a pioneer of modern heavy metal production, and a fiercely loyal musician. With his passing, Phil Anselmo and Rex Brown became the only surviving members of Pantera's best-known, era-defining lineup.
This profound loss seemed to definitively close the book on Pantera forever. But the narrative takes a massive, unexpected turn, bringing the story to the present day. In July 2022, the music industry was completely stunned by an official announcement. It was confirmed that Phil Anselmo and Rex Brown were reuniting for a major global tour under the Pantera name.
To fill the monumental, seemingly impossible shoes of the Abbott brothers, they recruited two deeply respected musicians with profound personal ties to the band, Zakk Wylde on guitar and Charlie Benante on drums.
How exactly did Wilde and Benante approach this? Because stepping into the roles of Dimebag and Vinnie is an incredibly sensitive undertaking.
Both Wilde and Benante accepted the roles with explicit, deep reverence. They publicly and repeatedly stated they viewed their participation not as a replacement of the original members, but as a dedicated, faithful tribute to the Abbott brothers. They meticulously studied the live arrangements, the specific gear used, and the precise playing styles to ensure the music was presented as authentically as possible.
The global reaction was explosive. This new iteration of Pantera made a massive return to the stage, beginning with major festivals in Latin America in late 2022. They embarked on an extensive European tour in 2023. They secured a massive co-headlining slot supporting Metallica on their global stadium tour, playing to tens of thousands of people every single night.
This robust, worldwide touring schedule has continued relentlessly throughout 2024-2025 and is carrying right into the spring and summer of the present day in early 2026. They are bringing this foundational music to massive festival crowds, ensuring the power groove is heard live once again.
What is vital to understand about this current iteration is how it functions as a living, breathing tribute. Zakk Wylde and Charlie Benante are not attempting to rewrite the legacy, they are honoring it.
This allows an entirely new generation of fans, many of whom were not even born when the band originally broke up, to experience the sheer physical power of this catalog in a live stadium setting.
Furthermore, there are persistent rumors and public comments from both Benante and Brown about the future. They have hinted at the potential release of new live recordings, capturing the energy of this massive tour. There is even speculative discussion in the press about potentially utilizing pre-existing, unreleased riffs recorded by the Abbott brothers to craft new material, though the primary focus of the musicians remains heavily on executing the live tribute experience.
It is a remarkable final chapter to an unbelievable story. To synthesize the massive arc of the journey you have just taken with us, we have traced the evolution of four musicians who started as a family-run glam metal band playing regional clubs in Texas, recording in their father's studio.
Through sheer willpower, unmatched technical skill, and the vital addition of an explosive frontman, they transformed into the architects of a revolutionary heavy metal subgenre.
They survived and dominated every shifting music trend of the 1990s, completely uncompromising in their extreme sound. They endured unimaginably painful internal fractures and the most horrific tragedy possible. Yet they have arrived at a place today where their music is celebrated on massive stadium tours worldwide, serving as a soaring tribute to fallen brothers. They are undeniably permanently cemented as one of the definitive Big Four bands of 1990s metal.
We want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you process everything we have discussed. Consider the monumental sliding doors moment we mentioned earlier regarding Dave Mustaine's offer in 1988. I want you to imagine how the entire landscape of modern heavy music would look today if the Abbott brothers had accepted that offer. If Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul had packed up and joined Megadeth, the Pantera we know would have ceased to exist. Would groove metal as a genre have ever been invented? How many thousands of bands that followed in their wake would sound completely different or perhaps never exist at all? The entire trajectory of heavy metal hung on that single decision of brotherly loyalty. Thanks for listening.